You got anything, Melissa? Oh, you have to ask Vicky.
Okay.
Are you okay if we go ahead and start? Are you okay if we go ahead and start? Okay. All right, we'll call the meeting to order, the work session for February 27th, 2023. I'd like to welcome the Economic Development Authority and Public Service Authority for joining us tonight for this presentation. I'll let the EDA and PSA call their meetings to order. How about the Economic Development Authority? All right. Thank you. As we'll be receiving a presentation tonight on the Rockbridge County Water and Sewer Capacity Study. I believe there's about 5 items that they're going to cover, and the PSA received a presentation last week, and I believe it's going to take about 10 minutes for each presentation. And unfortunately, we only have an hour before the supervisors meeting starts. So as I've asked our board, please hold your questions, write them down, and email Ms. Alexander, and she will get you a response. She'll collaborate everything from all 3 groups and send out a response to all the questions. Okay. All right. At this point, I'd like to turn the floor over to Brandy Flint to give a brief agenda update. Are you ready?
As you've seen in your work session items, the PSA, Economic Development, and the county have worked together to do a public water and sewer capacity study, and this is going to be the results of that study. So I am going to turn it over to Paula Moore and Jess Fulton.
Hi, I'm Paula Moore with Whitman Record and Associates, WRA. Jess is, unfortunately, she wasn't able to be with us this evening, but we have, I have Nathan Dameron here with me, and also Matt Gross is with Hurt Profit back there. We teamed up, or we both were basically performing these services for the PSA, kind of divided up the county by area. And so we're each going to present on the areas that we studied. So WRA studied the Natural Bridge, water and sewer areas, and Hurt and Profit studied, as you see, the Route 60 East, Route 11 North, and the Rafine areas. The primary objective of the project was to focus on economic development, helping Brandy and the Economic Development Department know what capacity existed in the water and sewer systems, so that when she gets inquiries, she can be better equipped to answer those, as well as identifying certain capacity improvements to get to a certain target flow rate. Secondary was through this process, we were able to develop hydraulic models so that system-wide the systems could be evaluated. So these are the 5 areas evaluated. As I mentioned, there's 2 down in Natural Bridge. One is a tourism area, one's economic development. And then Route 60 East, Route 11 North, and Rafine tourism zones were studied. Okay, so the Natural Bridge area, we have the Natural Bridge Industrial Park and the Natural Bridge State Park, the 2 areas that were studied as part of this project. Natural Bridge water system is lays out here, as you see on the map. As we go through each one of these slides, we're going to present the limiting capacity. We evaluated all various components of each water and sewer system, and we've identified here on the screen that in this case, Natural Bridge is source limited. And currently today, there's a remaining available capacity of 79,000 gallons per day and change. So that's the available capacity in the water system. That system is served by two wells, the Natural Bridge well and the Arnold's Valley well. On the other end of the system, sewer wastewater capacity, the sewer system in Natural Bridge is limited by the Route 130 pump station capacity. And considering the current usage, there's a remaining available capacity of 55,000 gallons per day. And that pump station pumps into the town of Glasgow's system, and there's a wastewater agreement for treatment capacity downstream. So one of the tasks, one of our first tasks was, all right, what's the goal? How much additional capacity are we trying to add to the system? So in this case, in Natural Bridge, we said it's feasible to develop 500,000 gallon per day capacity. And what is that going to require? What improvements will be needed to get to that level? And how much are they going to cost? So you can see here summarized within the red blocks. As I noted earlier, the Natural Bridge water system is source water limited. So the key to getting that 500,000 gallon per day capacity here is developing a new source. We looked at the alternatives of developing more well capacity. In this case, the town of Glasgow has a pretty sizable well that is underutilized. So we proposed to put in a 510 gallon per minute pump station. That, of course, would require negotiation with the town of Glasgow to purchase that water from them. And so the estimate for that improvement is 2.1 million. To develop additional wastewater capacity in the Natural Bridge sewer system, we settled on a target of 250,000 gallons per day. And looking at the numbers, we just felt it was not feasible to go any higher than that. So to develop a capacity of 250,000 gallons per day, we've got a number of improvements shown here. We've got a 10-inch gravity sewer, and that is primarily laid out to serve the industrial park. We would have to develop a new pump station to be able to handle that flow. An 8-inch sewer force main. And of course, this is all still being conveyed through the town of Glasgow system. So again, this would require negotiation with the town for additional treatment capacity. We did discuss these items with the town of Glasgow, and there's still some unknowns related to their wastewater system. It's unknown what the capacity of their collection system is. There does appear to be permit capacity at the wastewater plant. So that 250,000 gallons per day comes with a price tag of 5.6 million. All right, moving over to the Natural Bridge State Park. In this case, it's a known user, or to some extent, the usage is known. There are some uncertainties with that just due to the age of the system. To the best of our knowledge, the current Natural Bridge State Park uses just under 65,000 gallons per day of water. So we, as opposed to coming up with a much larger number, we just said, what would it take to serve that amount of water usage? And so we have shown here a proposed 12-inch water main extending from the existing water infrastructure. That's the Buck Hill system, which comes off the Natural Bridge system. And that's a 12-inch water main extending approximately along Route 11. In order for this project to be implemented, it is also contingent on an agreement between the hotel and DCR, an agreement to reduce on-site leakage, and appropriate funding for this project. And for that project, it's estimated to cost 2.4 million. Providing Natural Bridge State Park with wastewater service would require a pump station at the park, and we've got a proposed 4-inch sewer force main shown there. It's approximately 3 miles from the state park to the nearest location within the existing Natural Bridge sewer system. Again, this project would be contingent on the same agreement between the hotel and DCR, agreement to reduce on-site inflow and infiltration, as well as adequate funding. The cost estimate for that project, and I failed to mention there, the current wastewater flows at the park are 25,000 gallons per day. And that's going to cost $5.3 million estimated. And just in summary, summarizing all of the Natural Bridge improvements, both at the industrial park and the Natural Bridge State Park. You can see the combined water capacity developed of that 565,000 gallons per day for an estimated cost of $4.5 million. And then combined sewer capacity development of 275,000 gallons per day for combined estimate of $10.9 million.
And we'd like to start with just talking about the Route 60 East Tourism Zone. We went ahead and threw some location things on the map so that you have an idea of where we're talking about, where these, how big these tourism zones are. And that's Paula said, by the way, I'm Matt Gross. There really isn't a lot limiting the Route 60 East water. The most limiting thing is the amount of water that's actually stored in the MSA loop around the city that directly feeds this area. So as you can see, based on the current usage, there's plenty of remaining capacity. And the nice thing is I'm going to combine some slides and make things easier. You don't have to do anything to get to be able to serve a 500,000 gallon a day user in this area. There's no improvements would be necessary for water. The existing capacity, the pump station that was built there is going to be the limiting item. The pump station can pump about 130,000 gallons a day. That's what it was designed for. It's currently using about 20,000 gallons a day. So it has a good remaining capacity. And there are existing dual force mains in that area. However, to get to a large proposed user, we would basically have to replace or construct an additional pump station to be able to pump a large capacity. Do the collection system improvements that are dependent on where in that tourism zone. If you're towards the northern end of that tourism zone, you're not going to have to do as much sewer construction. If you're all the way out towards the tire facility, that would require more sewer collection system replacement. So it depends on where in that system. Our estimate for the sewer cost would be about $3.9 million. It would also require some sewer improvements over on the other side of the Route 11 bridge to replace about 800 feet of collector to the MSA collector line. The Route 11 North Tourism Zone was the second zone that we looked at. And again, like the Route 60 system, this area is limited in capacity off the storage of the MSA system. So nothing is really needed for a 500,000 gallon per day capacity. The lines are there and there is no pumping required. So it's just the storage, and the storage is not an issue. Regarding sewer, it really comes down the existing sewer system capacity. The most limiting thing we have is the collection system. There are a lot of older lines that are at 8-inch size, and when you pump into them, the specific line that's the most critical one is where the deep hole pump station connects to the gravity sewer that then flows down 11 to the interceptor. And when that pump station is running, it uses all but 38,000 gallons of one of the existing lines. To do a proposed large user on the north side of 64, it would only be about $1 million worth of improvements to increase the gravity sewer system capacity to be able to handle a large flow. On the south side of 64, it depends again on where you want to do your development. Our worst case scenario is we were looking at it in the area of the Applebee's, where it would then flow to the deep hole pump station, in which case you're having to replace the gravity lines to the deep hole pump station. The deep hole pump station the depot pump station force main, and then all the gravity sewer from where the force main pumps in all the way back through the MSA. And that's a substantial portion of that system. Oh, sorry, to put in some graphics for me. That's the north side, and that's the south side. And you can see again what would be involved in having to do those improvements. The last zone that we looked at was the Racine tourism zone. Regarding water, our critical need here is pumping. Storage would also be an issue, but pumping is the more critical one. And as you can see, when the water comes off the Lexington system, it goes to the Grassy Ridge tank, which is then pumped by the North Lexington tank, or the North Lexington booster pump station, which then fill the tank. And then the Fairfield pump station pumps it, then the Fairfield 2 pump station pumps it, then the Fairfield 3 pump station pumps it, then the Racine pump station. So there's our limiting factor is that it's actually the Fairfield 3 pump station is the most critical one. It has the lowest capacity of those 5 pump stations. And again, based on that, the current capacity is 435,000 gallons a day. It currently pumps 176, and we have a remaining capacity of 259,000. Sewer, the most critical issue is the collection system. There are some pipes that are laid at minimum slope, which means it has a capacity of about 347,000 gallons a day. The current usage isn't much, about 25,000 gallons a day. And so the remaining capacity is over 300,000 gallons a day, but that is still our most critical part of this project. To accommodate a large water user, we would need to upgrade 4 of the 5 pump stations. The Racine pump station actually has enough capacity to handle the proposed 500,000 gallon per day user and would not require any improvements. However, as I said, 4 of the 5 pump stations would be needed, and up at the northeast end of the system, we would need either an additional ground storage tank or replace the 2 existing tanks that are there with an elevated tank. And as you can see, we included both prices there. A ground storage tank is significantly cheaper than an elevated tank, but there are different other advantages to going with an elevated tank. Regarding sewer, to accommodate a user of 500,000 gallons per day, we estimated with 2 different costs, 3.9 million for something that was north of 81 and 5 million for south of 81. The north improvement would basically be replacing all of the existing 8-inch line to that area. The south improvements would be replacing all of those 8 inches line. And both of those would require a portion of the common line to be replaced. And the 2 costs, the 3.9 includes the common and the north or the south of the common. We would also need to replace the impellers at the Racine pump station to increase the capacity there. Already the pump motors are sufficiently large enough that we just have to replace the impellers. In summary, we tried to do a little bit of a total of what you can see what would be required for the different alternatives. And to what extent you were trying to get. All of the routes 60, 11, and Racine were aimed at being able to serve a 500,000 gallon per day user. As they said, if you have any specific questions, you can go ahead and contact Melissa, and she'll be happy to pass them on to Paul and I.
Good time, we can take questions now.
Yeah. Yeah, I apologize. The presentation that we received last week took a while. You condensed it and you got it much quicker. Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
we tried to
So
answer the questions that we were going last week, make things smoother.
yeah, it was a great presentation. Thank you very much for the information. EDA, you have any questions or anything you'd like to?
If we could approach the microphone, Jamie, that would be helpful. Not pick up with the body. So anyone who does want to speak, please go.
I have a question. Can I?
Let-
Oh,
let-
did somebody else?
let Ms.
Oh,
Harris go
let me
first.
see.
Yeah.
Just a second.
Yep.
Your last slide, I didn't add up everything on the package that we were sent. Do you have a total if they did everything?
No, we don't have a total. One, there are several options that are available. One of which the question would be out there would be the ground storage tank would be a third tank that you would be able to see. To provide the 30 PSI that the authority is generally providing in that area, half those tanks is not effective storage. But an elevated tank would be 100% effective storage, and it would also put them in the advantage of only having to maintain one tank in that facility
Rather than several.
rather than three. So there, like I said, there are added advantages and disadvantages, but you can actually see an elevated tank is significantly more expensive than a ground storage tank. Generally on the earth, about 5 times more.
With any of the improvements that would be done to the properties along this stretch, no matter which direction we go, it seems like to me that improved water and sewer would greatly enhance the value of anyone's property that happens to be along that corridor. Any of the stretches that we go, Natural Bridge, Rapine, or Route 11. And I'm wondering if there's ever been any kind of participation by landowners, property owners, in a public venture with public-private venture and sharing in any of the costs that might improve the value significantly of the land of somebody who might have the hope of developing it to its full potential. So that's the only question I really have, is if that's something that could be explored, if there's ways to do that without penalizing anyone who had improvements to their property previously. Those people got the enhancements maybe without any skin in the game. But if there's a chance that someone's property could be significantly improved in value because of these enhancements that we would do with extending water and sewer, just want to know if there could be a public-private partnership to do that.
Actually, I was going to ask about the advantages.
Go ahead.
No, he answered it,
Okay.
actually. Thank you.
Well, the short answer is yes, there can be limited government funds limited to economic development, but that is generally associated with a specific business that is promising jobs, such as the DHCD community block grant or urban development grant. And that generally has to have a industry that is going in and promising they're going to hire so many people, and then you get a certain amount of grant generally per person. And
We'll look into that further, Jamie. Get you a picture.
Most of this is improving what already exists. So it's
Folks,
not really-
you definitely, Melissa, you need to talk into the mic so it gets the recording.
Most of this is improving what already exists, so it doesn't, I don't believe that typically increases the land value that much that I'm aware of, not my area, but, and the two areas where it's going, possibly going if this happens, would be to serve the state park. And I think it's passing about 4 or 5 houses, maybe at most, and then, probably on both directions, water and sewer. And the sewer is a force main for the vast majority of it, which it's a little bit more difficult for a homeowner to connect. It can be done, but it does cost them more to have a pump in their residence to get it into the force main.
So I was mainly thinking about the property along Route 11, right, and it has more commercial business development. Where I was kind of thinking, but I understand about Natural Bridge. But
I would say most of the 11 areas are already served by either gravity sewer in that area or water in that area. And these projects would not have, we're primarily talking about improving the transmission facilities in that area, not the line.
if they were improved, it would expand.
Could you repeat the question so that it gets on the, sir?
Yes, she asked if the other improvements were done, would it,
If the improvements were done.
Yeah.
Would that?
if the improvements were done, would that add to the ability for an individual to develop their property? And the answer is potentially. But there already is significant ability and available capacity in that system.
We come into play when the capacity diminishes to where we can't allow new connections. But, if someone were to develop somewhere along that line now, we have the capacity currently, then to take care of it. But yeah, it will get to the point where we don't, which is part of the reason why we did this, was to understand better where we are today and where we possibly want to go.
And I think the main reason too for the study was, as we have potential businesses from whether it's the Shenandoah Valley Planning Commission or coming out of Richmond, Brandy gets certain calls and says, we have a potential new business looking for an area. What amount of water or sewer can you provide? And this is what, this particular business may need 150,000 gallons of water a day and 100,000. So this lets us know what's currently available so that we can say, yes, we have that, or no, we don't, but we know what it costs to get there. And so tell us more about the business, what type of jobs, what type of opportunity, what type of income. So that's more behind where this study was coming from.
The good news is the Rapine system can basically take up to about $250,000 without doing any significant improvements now. It's already there. It's getting from that $250,000 to $500,000 that you're looking at having to do a lot of these improvements.
Yeah, it appeared that the East Lexington and North Lexington and Rapine, I mean, certainly there are some improvements that could be done, but there's capacity there. It's really where there's limiting capacity, and maybe the help that is needed is more of the state park than the Natural Bridge area. So that's good to know. I think we would have to consult with the state park and the hotel, and I believe it's a church there. They're all commingled on that line to see what improvements need to be done through the system there. It's one thing to get water and sewer there. It's another thing if if the pipes can't handle it. So, we need to discuss that with those entities to make sure.
First silly question, maybe not the first one. Your sewer line's coming out of Rapine, 8-inch,
Depends on where they are. There are 8 to 12-inch line already there.
8 to 12-inch line. Proposed force main from Natural Bridge Station down in the Glasgow, proposed line of 8-inch. What's the difference in a 4-inch line coming out of the state park and down and commingling with that 8-inch line, other than putting a 6 or 8 there to begin with? I'm a force other than the hole in the ground. I mean, I realize there's material costs, but if you're already going to put a 6-inch hole in the ground to put a 4-inch pipe in there, what's the difference in putting a 12-inch hole in the ground and putting an 8-inch pipe there? And then it's similar.
So the big difference between a 4-inch sewer force main and say an 8-inch gravity main is the need for manholes. And a gravity main has to be installed straight and on grade, and you have manholes every so often. So that makes the alignment along Route 130 exorbitantly more difficult than a force main that can go up and down and go around bends. 4-inch is just the minimum size needed to serve the state park. If there was some potential for additional growth, that could be a larger force main, but it would still be a force main, which means that it's pressurized, and you can only get into it with another pressurized system.
The other difference is you have to pump at a certain velocity for a force main. And if you put in a bigger pipe than you need right now, that water is going to take forever to get from where the pump is to where it discharges by gravity. And therefore the wastewater will be in the line in an inordinate amount of time, it will get to be very septic and very nasty by the time it actually gets to glass cap.
If,
I'm trying to be polite.
Yeah, enough said.
Okay.
More than you wanted to know, right?
if you have a force main,
Yes,
can, say, a residential home hook onto that force main?
potentially, yes, they will need their own pump station, however. And they do make residential style pump stations that generally can pump into a fourth main.
And doing this study from the state park to Natural Bridge Elementary School, was there any consideration of how many residential homes might want to hook in to this?
No, the study really just focused on the state park, serving the state park. If we wanted to look at additional customers along the route, we could expand that, but
I don't understand why we would be putting in a sewer line or a water line without the intentions or capability of other people hooking onto it.
like I said, it could be done, but that, yeah, wasn't the focus of the study.
It probably costs prohibitive for a private homeowner like me to hook onto a force main, where it would be a whole lot easier to hook onto a gravity feed.
It would be a whole lot easier to hook onto a gravity feed. However, a gravity system from there, if it could even be constructed, because it has to be all the way downhill, continuous, would probably be cost prohibitive for the amount of money that the BSA would be making from the users. Good deal.
So if a homeowner wanted to hook on to this force main, what would be the estimated cost to do that?
The last time I did an E1 system, I would say it was between 10 to 15,000 to buy it and get the equipment installed.
Another 5 for the PSA fees.
Did that come through? Okay. Yes, it can be done. It's not cheap.
We have about, maybe about 10 more minutes. Any other questions?
should have done this to start with, but we'll see if the batteries work.
I had one since you're letting us ask questions there. Miss Alexander, I thought there was a well on Buck Hill. I must have misunderstood that. I see there's a pump station there, but I thought there was a well of some sort.
I think there is a well that's just not shown on there.
Okay.
Actually, source well connected to
There's one as you go into Arnold's Valley.
Yes, sir, but I thought there was one on Buck Hill as well.
No,
There's a
I'm
pump
sorry,
station.
no, There's not. No.
There's a tank.
I was thinking of the Arnold Valley tank that wasn't shown on that. 'Cause it's
Ooh.
out of the view.
So what well are they using? Just the one as you go into Arnold's Valley?
The Natural Bridge in Arnold Valley.
Yes.
Okay, wait a second. I'm being,
Hey, Melissa, can you talk into the mic, please?
hold on, I'm getting
Website.
technical assistance.
The Natural Bridge and all Valley wells both pump into a joint tank. It's above the sawmill where they made remember sawmill.
Yeah.
Anyway, and so then Buck Hill takes away from that tank and fills the tank then or across the road from the zoo.
Yeah, but there's no Buckhill well.
There's no Buck Hill well. There was a Buck Hill well like in the early 90s. It still shows on the G9 side.
I know I'd seen it somewhere, I thought, but
Back then, there was like a community improvement project and that well got abandoned.
just wanted to make sure we weren't missing any source there.
All right. Well, again, I appreciate the presentation. Thank you very much for all your hard work. Anyone that has questions, as you know, you're digesting this information over the next several weeks, please forward an email to Ms. Alexander. She'll compile a list of all the questions and answers and all and distribute it out to each of the boards. Thank you. At this point, the Board of Supervisors work session will conclude. I'll let the EDA and PSA do it. Thank everyone for attending. Please be careful on your way home.
I have one more copy of the presentation if anybody didn't get one that wants it.
No, I guess they're passing those.
Okay, at this point, we will call the meeting to order for the Rockbridge County Board of Supervisors, February 27th, 2023. At this point, I'll do a roll call. Supervisor Lewis.
Present.
Supervisor Day.
Here.
Supervisor Ayers.
Here.
Supervisor Lyons.
Here.
And Supervisor McDaniel's present as well. We will now have a prayer for the board, followed by a pledge of allegiance. Those attending are not required to participate, but if you'd like to join us, please stand.
Lord, we thank you for giving us this day and this time to meet to conduct the business of the county. Guide us in the decisions that we make. We know that the decisions that we make are pleasing to you. They are right for us here in the county. Forgive us of our many sins. Thank you for the blessings that you have bestowed upon us. And I thank you for hearing and answering my prayer.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We will hold citizen comments at the beginning of the meeting. We will do our best to take citizen comments remotely. There are two options for citizens to offer comment. To join by telephone, you may dial into one of the numbers listed on the county website. The webinar ID and password are there for your convenience. Citizens wishing to simply view the meeting live or after the fact can do so in the Rockbridge County Board of Supervisors YouTube channel, also available on the county website. If you wish to make a citizen comment as a Zoom meeting participant, you will use the raise your hand feature. You can press the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom window or press *9 if calling in by telephone. All right, changes to the agenda. I am going to move item number 12 under public hearings. We'll do that one first under the public hearing section. So just be moving it up to number 9. Any other changes to the agenda, Mr. Suter? No, sir. Okay. All right. Don't believe we have any recognitions or presentations tonight. No, sir. All right. At this time, we'll open up the citizen comments. Is there anyone signed up wishing to address the board?
Yes, sir. We have a Mr. Bowyer.
Yeah, please come forward to the podium. Please state your name, address, and please address the board as a whole.
Well, I'm Greg Bowyer. I live at 71 Appalachian Rise. Been there for about 30 some years. It's in the Walker's Creek district. And we have some issues with dogs. Don't know how to address it, but we don't know if they have license, tags, kennel. They don't even know if they even bought a permit to even build a kennel. And we're really concerned about the wrecked cars they got sitting around their property. Can y'all help me if an ordinance, is there an ordinance on any of this?
This is your chance to voice your concerns to the board as a whole. And I would direct you to Mr. Suter or Ms. Huffman, our county attorney, for any legal or ordinance questions or anything like that outside of this meeting. But please take your time to address the board as a whole. Please tell us what's going on and we'll go from there.
Any given day, there's enough stench down there to really make it bad on property owners. It's worked all their life to buy this property. But these lots are no more than an acre. So you can imagine how close they are. Somebody's got pictures floating around there somewhere, how close they are. And there's several pictures of wrecked cars and stuff they got sitting around. I don't think they have tags, insurance, or nothing. He turned it in like a dumping ground in the county. That's what I had to say.
Well, we appreciate it. Again, if you let Mr. Suter or Ms. Huffman know, or you can either contact them directly or give them your telephone number and they'll reach out to you about the ordinance or anything like that. All right. Thank you for your comments. Anyone else signed up?
Yes, sir. We have an Angie Rader.
I'm Angie Rader. My address is 81 Appalachian Rise. I'm also in the Walker's Creek district. My house is directly next door to the pictures that are coming around to you. My complaints are similar to Mr. Bollier that you just heard. For several months now, our neighborhood has been under siege with the lot at 89 Appalachian Rise that has an exorbitant amount of dogs in kennels in the backyard. We are kept awake every night with excessive barking. So loud that no matter how loudly we turn our televisions on, we cannot drown out the barking. We have repeatedly called the sheriff's office. They have come out a number of times, but they tell us that there are no laws that they can enforce when they come to this home, that there are no barking ordinances that they can impose. There are no, they can call the SPCA because of the conditions that the dogs are kept in, but they really cannot do anything to help us. My house is next door, so the stench from these dogs is so horrific that my children cannot play outside in the yard without the smell being overwhelming. We cannot enjoy our fire pit area or our pergola that's outside. I know that a barking ordinance came before you all last spring and that it was voted down, but I do ask that you reconsider it for those of us in the county that live on an acre of land, because we don't all own hundreds and hundreds of acres and we're not all divided by lots of land. Some of us are on lots that are just as close to one another as city lots. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else signed up?
No, sir.
All right. Is there anyone present who didn't have an opportunity to sign up wishing to address the board? Okay. Is there anyone online wishing to address the board? No, sir. Okay. All right. Then at this point, we'll close citizen comments. Next up, we have approval of the minutes. I believe you have 3 sets of minutes, January 19th, February 6th, and February 13th. Has everyone had a chance to review those? Any questions, concerns, comments? Is there a motion to approve as presented? So moved. And a second?
Second.
All right. All right, Mr. Lyons?
Yes.
Ms. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Day?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Aye.
And Chair votes yes as well. Next up, we have consideration of the school appropriation resolution. Mr. Harrison?
Yes, there's a total of $228,969 in total Fund 50 appropriations, comprising of both new grants for capital and money from the emergency connectivity funds.
All right. Is there any questions for Mr. Harrison on that? Is there a motion to approve
So moved.
and a second?
Second.
All right. Mr. Day?
Yes.
Ms. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Lyons?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Aye.
And Chair votes yes as well. Next up, we have an update from Davenport on the finance and debt profile. Is,
Uh,
go ahead.
Yes,
Mr.
sir. Yeah, annually, the board receives a financial health update from Davenport and Company, the county's financial advisor. The particular focus of today's presentation is an analysis of the county's debt as we pursue debt funding in the amount of $9 million for the Floyd SK Technical School and $14 million for our new human services building. With us today is Mr. R.T. Taylor with Davenport to provide the debt analysis and discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor.
Thank you for having me. You have a hard copy in front of you. I'm gonna flip through mine and reference the page numbers, which are in the bottom right-hand corner of each page. As you take this report away with you this evening, if you want to go back and look through, the sections are tabbed and there is a table of contents up front that'll help you sort of recollect where things that we spoke about were, okay? I'm gonna flip to first page 3. Just a little bit of background. As Ashton spoke to, we do a report for y'all typically around the budget time each year. The last time we did it was back last April. We updated that this fall for purposes of discussions with the Finance Committee in anticipation of being here around this time. That was the plan. we were asked to layer in the potential $9 million borrowing for the schools and approximately $14 million for the human services building. So what you'll see in front of you this evening is going to speak to how y'all have been tracking and how that will look when you layer this potential new debt into your debt portfolio. Flipping to page 4, this is something that some of you may remember from last spring, where we look at your complete debt portfolio, see what you're paying in debt service annually, which is roughly $6.5 million, $6.6 million. You do have some offsetting resources that come from others, meaning you have an agreement with Lexington to cover some of your their portion of schools debt service, as well as some subsidy monies that you get from bonds that you did back in call it the mid-teens, where the IRS or the Fed was providing subsidy monies the way you issued your bonds. So in short, the dark green of this graph on the right is your existing debt profile. And you'll see that over the next several years, that dark green starts to, I'm on page 4, bottom right-hand corner, I apologize. Sorry,
Tab 4,
page 4,
sorry.
not tab 4. That's my fault, I might have misspoke, I apologize. So on this page 4, on the right-hand side, there's a graphic, and those dark green bars are your existing debt. Each year you pay that debt service, it's starting to step down over time. The light green bar is showing your potential debt affordability going forward. So as that steps down, we hold our budget level, we can capture some of those declines to reprogram toward our capital needs. The county is currently appropriating, if you will, about 23 pennies out of your budget per year toward the debt service, okay? So roughly $6.2 million comes straight from the general fund to support both county and schools debt. And if you flip the page one more time to page 5, this is how that looks numerically, if you will. Starting from left working right, column A is obviously fiscal years. Column B is your debt service, and you'll see it starts at roughly $6.5 million and steps down. You are budgeting that $6.2 million, call it in perpetuity, because that's what you're currently funding towards your capital needs, both from the county and school side. Column D are those other resources that I spoke to, the QSCAD subsidies, as well as Lexington's share of their school, of the school's debt service. And then lastly, when you sum up columns C and D, you get to column E. So you've got in your budget $6.5 million of revenue sources that are recurring. These are not one-time monies. On the left-hand side in B, you've got your $6.5 million in debt service. When you do the math in column F, you're either going to have a deficit or surplus. And what we're showing here is that specifically in 23, the county's budget was set up purposely based on our planning over the past couple of years that we're going to hold the line on our capital needs and pick up those declines. As we capture those declines, we're either going to be able to offset new debt service or squirrel it away into a capital reserve fund to be used for those capital projects. So you'll see in a couple more pages where we show how that money sort of builds up, and then we're able to use it to defray some of those new capital needs to offset or mitigate potential real estate or other tax increases. What we've done here in this report, as we typically do, because most people can relate to the real estate tax rate, is we've benchmarked the needs to the real estate rate. It does not mean you have to raise the rates specifically on real estate to get there. It's just a basis to give you some kind of indication of what's the equivalent revenue sources we need to generate. So flipping a little bit further to behind tab 2, page 7. This report specifically looks at the $9 million renovation of Floyd SK, which we've submitted applications for both the literary fund loan process or program, as well as what you typically use is the Virginia Public Schools Authority spring pool bonds. Okay, so we've applied for both of those. For the summer or fall 2023 human services building, that's call it a non-school project. And that would be the other state program to help us fund that potentially would be Virginia Resources Authority. We'll also dual track that with banks to see what kind of rates and terms and conditions the banks will give us, and we'll do that analysis for you at the appropriate time. But just want to point that out. We've included in our analysis here tonight both projects, so you can see the aggregate potential impact as opposed to just isolating one. Okay, the timing may shift on the human services book. So flipping to the next page, I'm not going to belabor the county project for now, but I will point out that that process is evolving. Univista and Lexington will also potentially be users of that facility and potentially share in the cost. So the county might take the lead on issuing the debt, but you're going to have a potential agreement between the other localities in the county such that they are covering their share. There is a portion of the new human services building that may lend itself to being funded on a taxable basis based on the healthcare center using about 5,000 square feet, which is roughly 17% of the facility. So for our analysis, we've assumed we would potentially have to borrow $2.5 million of the 14 on a taxable basis, which is typically a higher interest rate. But to minimize that interest expense, we've shortened that up to about 10 years or so to cut out some of the overall higher taxable interest rate on the back end and wrap the taxable tax exempt piece around it. So you've got higher interest rate debt on the taxable side and a lower interest rate on the tax exempt side. Okay. So when you blend them all together, you would still have mortgage style payments, level annual debt service, but we're just trying to structure that taxable higher cost piece over a shorter period of time. Okay. The school project, y'all are familiar with the Floyd SK renovation project. We've got a $9 million not to exceed par amount, and that public hearing will be held on March 13th. That's right, March 13th will be the public hearing.
For sure.
I believe that's.
I think it is.
Yeah. Yes. So what you will have coming up at your March 13th meeting is a public hearing about that up to not to exceed $9 million par amount. We won't issue any more debt than we have to get the school project done. And I believe Spencer or Ashton, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we get our bids back on March 30th or thereabouts.
That's close.
Okay.
We've got a meeting next week to finalize everything.
Gotcha. And so we do not have to lock in our project or borrowing amount with VPSA. If we go the VPSA route, we don't have to give them the final number until after that March 30 or thereabouts. Okay. So we've got time to adjust the numbers so that we right size the borrowing. Okay. If you flip with me, I'm not going to belabor this section. I just want to point out specifically to this on the schools part on page 12. The county did put in place a reimbursement resolution on October 25th of 2021. So all that means is if you spent project money so far on the Floyd SK renovation and you wanted to put those back into your reserves to further strengthen the county's financial position, you would have that opportunity through the borrowing to recapture those dollars through the borrowing and put it back in the cookie jar, so to speak. Okay. Doesn't mean you have to, but having that in place gives you the flexibility to reimburse yourselves. All right, so now how are we going to potentially fund these projects? The county project, the Human Services Building, we're going to, as the discussions and project evolves, we're thinking we're going to be dual tracking that with that state program, Virginia Resources Authority. And like we've done for the county in the past is go out and survey the banks to see what they'll give us in the way of interest rates and terms and conditions. And then we come back to y'all, stack those up. VRA issues 3 times a year, spring, summer, and fall typically. The summer pool is a little bit flexible. Sometimes they don't do it, but they've indicated preliminarily they've got enough interest to to field a pool this summer. So I think the current thought is we should have things buttoned up in time to do the summer pool. But again, we'll keep you posted on that. On the school side, like I said earlier, we have actually submitted an application to the Literary Fund Loan Program. They've revamped how that program works. It's a little more flexible now, but it's just, I think what you'll see here shortly is that it may not fit for our structuring purposes. And stay tuned for a little bit more when I get to our scenarios. We're dual tracking that though with the spring pool for the way the county usually goes out and gets money for the schools is through the VPSA program, Virginia Public Schools Authority. The real benefit there is that they are very flexible on our structuring, which will help us layer in the new debt into your current portfolio. And the other key ingredient there is that they do not require collateral. So the county can pledge its general obligation in full faith and taxing power of the county to repay the bonds without tying up a county or school's asset. And based on our discussions in Finance Committee back in the fall, that seemed to be the preferred approach at this time.
What page are you on?
I apologize. I was on page 13. The other key to that is the state pool programs allow you to amortize that debt over a longer period of time than the banks are typically willing to lock in. Most banks right now are in the 10 to 15 range. Some will go out 20 years. But the state pool programs will let you go out as far as 30 years. And that helps again. Yes, it's a little bit more interest expense over the life of it, but it also keeps your payments low and you're able to afford more of the project. So,
Mr. Taylor.
Yes, sir.
As far as the direct banks are concerned,
Yes, sir.
How do you determine who you contact for those? There are obviously
Yes, sir.
many.
Right. And they're changing all the time, right?
True. So is there a list of interested banks that you pull from, or do you all
Yes,
have
sir.
relationships? I'll stop talking and let you answer the question. Yes,
So
sir.
you're fine. That's a great question. We actually, we push out an RFP or two every year, every week of the year, basically. We're constantly in the market with our bank RFPs. We maintain a database of over 100 banks. And that's not just locally, it's regionally, it's nationally. So you may or may not recall, but we've come back before with our RFP comparison to the state pool, and we've gone both ways. 2017, 2018, I think we did bank loans, but all the times around that, we've done state program. The point is we keep that database and we're constantly changing it because bankers change over, firms, banks change or merge. So we keep that updated as regularly as possible. But we always like to hear if there's a bank locally that needs to be added to our list, happy to do it.
And that was the
Yes,
question. If there's interested parties out there, would they be referred to you or
Send them
is there
to us,
someone in
send
your
them us.
agency? Okay.
Send them right to us and
Yes,
we'll
sir.
make sure they get on the list and get on the distribution. Even if it's gone out and somebody says, hey, we didn't get it, let us know. A lot of times, I don't want to pick on any one particular bank, but we'll send it out to call it the capital banking department, the team that looks at this stuff on a regular basis, but the local person doesn't necessarily hear about it. And there's a little bit of a disconnect in communication streams sometimes there. So we're happy to pull them into the loop and let them know, hey, you might want to touch base with so-and-so in your capital markets department.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
RT, I do have your presentation pulled up. I'll follow along with.
Okay. All right. I'm going to flip to page 16. So again, I want to make sure we're clear. We have analyzed both projects in this set of materials, the 9 million for the schools and the 14 for the human services building. Okay, so we've made certain assumptions, but they're both in here. Okay. Scenario one that you're going to look at, we've amortized that over 30 years at current market, and we've added a cushion, if you will, of 50 basis points. That's going to be the normal mortgage style payments over 30 years. So level annual debt service. Scenario 2 is where we said, okay, well, let's do something a little strategic here to fold it into the debt portfolio so we can make it more affordable. But at the same time, we don't want to necessarily be paying on it for 30 years and further exacerbate the interest expense on it. So we've shortened that up to 25 years to save some money. Okay. So we're able to do that and still keep future debt capacity for the county. And I'll show you how that works in a minute. So flip into page 17. Here is a quick summary eye shot. And I know there's a lot of numbers on the page, so page 17. Working again from left to right. Scenario 1, debt service streams for the Human Services Building under A, Floyd SKB, and then in the aggregate, when you sum them together, what does the total debt service look like for each fiscal year? So you can see how we build up to $1.4 million, and that's what it is annually all the way down, and you get to a total over the life of $42.7 million. Okay. Under our more structured and strategic approach in scenario 2, we've capitalized a little bit of interest. We've ramped up principal over the next few years. So you don't have any immediate payments over the next couple of years because you've borrowed that interest in your financing. However, on the back end, we've cut out about 5 years worth of debt service to further enhance and mitigate the interest expense associated with deferring principal or capitalizing interest. So in total there, the debt service is $40,941. And when you compare the numbers off to the right under column I, which is F minus C, you can see where in the first couple of years, you're saving, that's the parenthetical numbers, you're actually saving those dollars versus your budget over the first couple years. And then you can see where your debt service steps up. You're actually higher than the other scenario by $197,000 up to $538,000. But that's only during that period of time. And I can't, so bear with me, like fiscal years 29 out through 2048 or 49. So again, we're doing a little bit of structuring there, showing you the comparison between the two, but the upshot is we can get this structure to be more affordable compared to your current budget, but also take off about $1.8 million in interest expense at the back end. Okay, that's on row 33 at the very bottom on that far right-hand column. So how do these look in the affordability matrix that we spoke to earlier, where we showed the decline in debt service? How do we layer this in? If you almost skip past page 19, that's just a picture of layering in these borrowings on top of your dark green debt portfolio. And I'm gonna flip to page 20. Okay. And this is why I bring the books, is because it'd be impossible to see this. And I didn't bring my readers tonight, so I'm really suffering here. In 2024, if you work from left to right, column A, column B is $6.3 million. That's your existing debt. You have your first year with both buildings, both projects in here. Under column C, that's your new debt service that we're going to add on top. Column D is when you add them both together, you get to a total debt service of $7.5 million. Remember, I said earlier, you're currently at $6.5 million, right? So when you look at this resources in column E, that's your revenues to offset. So $6.5 million to offset the $7.5 million, you need about $1 million in fiscal year 24. Well, how are we going to get that, right? Over on the right-hand side, after you crunch all the numbers, we start to use some of that, those surpluses I was talking about earlier, where we were squirreling away monies in a cookie jar and we decline. Well, you would need roughly 3 pennies in 24 and just over, just less than a quarter in 26. Okay. And then after that, you can see where over on the right-hand side, under we're building that cookie jar back up. and we have surpluses going forward. That means dollars after we raise those pennies, start paying this new debt, we have additional dollars for future capacity. And I'll just note on page 1, which there are 3 graphics there. The county has some policies that we're always not forward. That's your debt to assessed value ratio, and your current policy is 3%. Your debt service expenditures, how much of my budget is going toward debt service? You're well within your policy limit. And then the 10-year payout ratio there at the bottom right just says how far are we amortizing our debt. And again, you're still above policy, but the 25-year amortization helps enhance that. This is the 30-year one. So you're going to see that enhancement on the next section. Yes, sir.
As we're in fiscal year 23,
Yes, sir.
we're preparing the budget for fiscal year 24. Either one of these projects, we're anticipating them not being completed, I would think, until at least probably somewhere in fiscal year 25. So does your numbers just drop down?
So your current, if we did no more debt, if we didn't do the debt for the projects that we're thinking of, your debt's going to step down.
No, I'm talking about when will the first payments be due on these debts?
Gotcha. Fiscal year 24.
Even though the projects won't be,
It won't be completed, but you borrow the money in anticipation of building those. You got to have the money to pay the contract.
and in theory, you can borrow enough to cover your first year's payments.
That's right. And that's in scenario 2.
Okay.
Yes, sir. You're going to see that. Very, very good question.
So where you've got, 3.08 cents, you may not actually have to increase the tax rate 3.08 cents because you're borrowing enough to cover that first year's payment.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
That's right. So let's flip then to scenario 2.
Quit reading ahead, David.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're good. It's a great question. It's a good transitional question. All right. So on page 23, again, this is just the graphic. And to your point, Mr. McDaniel, on this page, you can see very quickly between 23 and 25, it's only dark green bars because we're capitalizing our interest on the new debt service. So you're not out of pocket any debt service in the first couple of years. You start paying debt service in 26 and beyond. That's the light green and light blue on top. Oh, sorry. I'm on page 23. See the first couple.
This is
first few years.
scenario 2.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, so on page 24, again, columns A and B are the same. Fiscal year, your existing debt service. What looks different is under column C. It doesn't go all the way to the bottom of the chart because we cut 5 years off. And the first few years, you don't get up to $1.1 million because we've capitalized some interest and we're deferring some principal. If again, working right to left to right, you can see over here under column G where, excuse me, column F, net resources over under, you can see those first few years. If you could tie these back to that early page where I showed you where we're trying to capture that decline over the years, we're keeping those surpluses because we're capitalizing interest and deferring some principal. So over on the right-hand side under column I, on an annual basis, you're to the good 76,000, 191,000, 329,000, and all that gets banked over in that cookie jar in column K. When you get to fiscal year 27, so a few years from now, 3 years from the upcoming budget, that's when you might need 1.37 pennies based on this case, based on this scenario and doing some of that structuring. Okay. And then after that, you can see where your surpluses in column I start to ratchet back up. So that's, again, that's speaking to your future affordability, future debt capacity for other county and school projects that you might need later.
And that 1.37 is based off of today's tax base.
Correct. Yes, sir. I
So
know y'all are.
in theory, you've got 3 or 4 years to expand the tax base, which would potentially create more revenue, which would be you may not even need to do a penny or a 1.37 increase to cover that debt service.
Yes, sir. And to just take that thought a little further, again, like I said earlier, we benchmark it to your real estate tax rate for this purpose, just to give everybody a solid understanding of what the dollars mean. If you could take care of that with a half a penny on your real estate and get the other half or penny somewhere else.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
So this, we're calling this 2A as the natural impact. You wouldn't need that impact until 2027. If you flip one page to 2B, we assumed that in the current or the new budget year, fiscal year 24, we believe you have a reassessment going on and you're going to potentially equalize that, right? If you were to go ahead and address these needs through the 24 budget, again, the equivalent real estate tax rate impact would be just slightly over half a penny at 0.66 pennies. Okay. So if you equalize at 61 pennies, I mean, 61 and a half pennies almost covers this. Okay. If you didn't want to raise taxes at all, you might be able to just use, and this is in the green box at the top of the page, you could use approximately $1.7 million of your reserves over the next few years to defray those peaks, if that makes sense. Okay. We took it another step further and said, well, maybe 24 isn't the right year to do it. Let's look at 25. So that's about 3/4 of a penny. Wait one more year, it gets a little bit more expensive, so to speak. Not much, but it's a noted difference. Instead of being 0.66, it's 0.7. And then lastly, we wanted to bring it all the way to the 26 year just before the natural impact and say 1 penny out in 2026 would cover it. That's the 0.99. Okay.
The 1.7 in one-time monies from reserves is not, wouldn't be allocated in 1 year. It's allocated over the number of years that you're.
You got it.
Okay.
Yes, sir. And it also gives you time to, if you've got in 2024, if you end up with an operating surplus of $500,000, you might not have to, in addition to what you need for other things, you might not have to pull out of that 1.7 million bucket because your current operating surplus could be used toward. Yes, sir. And then just to bring it to closure on this scenario, you can see the ratios, you're still in line with your policies. And again, your payout ratio looks better again, because we shortened those 30-year financings in scenario 1 back up to 25 in scenario 2. Again, most of that's to mitigate the additional interest expense that you would incur doing some of those structuring techniques to get it to be a little bit more affordable. But again, it's saving money. So.
Well, isn't it, I mean, also, especially when you're talking about buildings, I mean, there's only so much life expectancy in a building. You know, you hope when you do renovations, you get a 25 or 30 years out of it, but
yes, sir.
in all likelihood, I mean, you're probably going to be in 25 or 30 years looking at another renovation.
That's
So,
possible. Yes,
so
sir.
the quicker that it gets paid off, the quicker you can potentially look at a new renovation.
That's right. Yes, sir. That's really it. There's in anticipation of maybe having some more detailed questions this evening, we included a bunch of details in the back in the appendices, but just to streamline the conversation tonight, that's why we moved that stuff to the back. But if you have any questions, I'm happy to address them.
I do, and I'm not sure it's for you. By the way, excellent work as usual.
Thank you.
Very informative. But my question is regarding offsetting revenues to this. When would it be appropriate to inquire as to what that is? It doesn't necessarily change the debt or the procedure that we're going through, but it does impact, you know, what Mr. McDaniel keeps keying on is penny rates and budgets.
So are you talking specifically about inputs coming back from the Health and Human Services side of things? And
Yes, sir.
what we get from the state?
Commonwealth, yes, sir.
We obviously we've had this discussion at the health department or Virginia Department of Health, Office of Drinking Water, and Office of Social Services have different funding mechanisms for what they what inputs they provide. We finally gotten to the right people at the Department of General Services in Richmond. We're waiting to hear back from them on the Office of Drinking Water and Virginia Department of Health about what inputs they might have, whether they would come as, and we have to be careful how you say this, whether it's rent or depreciation on the building. And also, we, as RT alluded to earlier, we're talking about a third, or actually a fourth party in the health center, potentially having a space there. Met with Suzanne Sheridan the other day, executive director, and we're talking about what a scenario looks like in that.
And that's yet a different cost share too. I have a note about that, I would assume, between the three localities.
Correct. What we're trying
That
to,
space would be cost shared differently than the taxable space. Or
correct,
the non-taxable.
correct. And that's what we're talking about. And we've got there's some discussions with bond counsel Daniel Laro to discuss how that looks as far as the taxable versus non-taxable and how we need to word agreements and whatnot. But we got forward progress on that. We still don't have anything back direct from the state. We actually had on the agenda tonight, a presentation on the Health and Human Services building, but I didn't want to bring that to you until I could answer that specific question, what the inputs are coming in. We don't have it yet. So,
and I know it's frustrating and a bit circular, but that's what's bothered me about this project the whole time. And I still feel like we're a little ahead of ourselves in talking about this without knowing what our funding's supposed to be. However, we don't have a state budget yet either. Again, well, it's one of those deals.
obviously I guess fourth factor in this is you just mentioned the other localities. There's going to be a certain amount of this cost that is borne by the localities. And then there's the cost formula for the localities as well. And typically what we've looked at is a per capita basis on capital side. And then you've got to have an ongoing agreement on what your operational agreement is as far as the operations. And they are not the same formula. So we're having that discussion. I've got we've gone draft contract or agreement. Ms. Huffman has given a comment to that as well and cycled it through the city managers to take a look at, and we're trying to put the finishing touches on that draft.
Okay.
So to answer your question in a word.
I don't think we'll be applying for any bonds or bank loans until things get buttoned up more.
Sure.
We just didn't want to be silent to the human services building in this overall impact because we know it's on the radar.
And there would, to your point, both of your all's points, there would be a revenue coming back in. And this is a conservative estimate based on what we've gotten from the A&E firm that gave us a number and just plugged the entire number in here to give you a magnitude.
We can update that in the affordability once we have some of those details.
I believe you said at the beginning of your presentation, and I'm sorry, I didn't write it down. When are you planning on applying for the bonds, particularly around the school project?
Okay, so for the schools, and that's the only progress we've made. We haven't done anything toward financing on the human services done at all. The application for the lit loan program was due February 10th. So that's been submitted, that's in the works. It's very nuanced because while they have changed that program to be more flexible going forward, it's not guaranteed. There's no guarantee that Rockbridge County gets approved and is awarded a loan. And we may not know that till mid to late April. Okay. The other thing is, we've applied to the VPSA school program as of today. That application was due today. And that's where the county has typically gone to get school funding, is through the pool program through VPSA. So we're just in the, call it initial stages of getting our place in line for these two different programs. And VPSA typically prices its bonds in April, and the county would have its money to spend on the school projects by the end of April, early May.
Okay.
Which I think Ashton or Spencer can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think spending is projected to begin 1st of July on the schools, on the renovation of Floyd SK. So we need that ahead of getting that because there's some, I guess, soft costs to cover between now and then as well.
Yeah, there are, and I'm trying to think back to our meeting last week with the executive committee. What's the timing on them getting a final price?
Not 100% sure on the final price. All I know is that what they're negotiating for is to get in and out in, hand it off and be a 1-year project so that they're not out of space. I know that doesn't answer your question, but my understanding was soon, but I don't think we got a date.
And I guess that gets to your, if you apply for the spring VPS bond, what is the date that you have to know the exact amount of that project? Because I know we put in up to 9 million, but yeah, I don't think any of us are planning on the 9 million figure.
It's early April to let them know what you're borrowing on. It's early to mid-April.
All right.
We can literally let them know the week before they sell the bonds.
Yeah. We just need to know that so we can communicate with the superintendent of schools.
What if we don't have those prices yet? What if we don't have that yet?
Well,
What happens then?
I think we have a good enough estimate to work from, and I think based on what the bids come in around, I think it's March 30th that the bids come in. I know there'll be some negotiation, but we'll have a good beat on the estimates by March 30th. That's my understanding.
And this is an all-in price too.
Just want to make sure, you know,
Yes, sir.
that it's, we don't hold, the schools don't necessarily hold us up from being able to apply. So they just need to know when they need to make those negotiations and have the final price.
I got you. Yeah, we have a more detailed financing schedule. I just don't have it in front of me now. And I know VPSA sent it around. So I know Mr. Daniels and yes. Well, it's still a little bit flexible. So you have to enter into the agreement that you're going to participate in the VPSA pool program on or about April 6th. And that's usually when you would let them know roughly what you're going to borrow, but you can still fine tune it within a week of, they go to sell their bonds April 25th. Okay. So back up a week or week and a half from that, they'd like to have things dialed in, especially ahead of posting the POS, the preliminary official statement out in the market.
Yeah.
That way they're not doing a lot of changing, but I think we're pretty close on what our numbers, so it'd be a de minimis change for them as a, you know, just a participating member of a larger pool.
Okay. And as far as your, I really appreciate, and I think you did an outstanding job of giving us some different options. So when as a board do we have to decide which option we want to pursue?
Well, I think maybe at the March 13th.
March
meeting,
13th.
That would be helpful to know. I mean, you're holding the public hearing there anyway. That should give you time to go through this a little bit more in detail, maybe funnel some questions through Spencer and Ashton to us, and we'll either answer them between now and then, or show up on March 13th and have those answers for you and answer any other questions you might have.
Is there any other questions the board have? Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
Great
Thank y'all very
presentation.
much.
Thank you for the information. I apologize to the public hearing participants that we went over, but very detailed information there. We will skip ahead to item number 9, which if you remember, I changed around. We'll do consideration of the farmers market code revisions at this point in time. Let's see here. Is that Ms. Huffman? Okay.
This is to hold a public hearing on proposed revisions to the farmers market regulations in County Code, Chapter 4, Article 5. You have a proposed ordinance included in your packet on board docs. The proposed ordinance would change the process from an annual required permit to an initial 1-year permit and thereafter to a 5-year permit. The application would include some additions proposed for the ordinance, a written narrative describing the nature of the proposed activities, proposed duration, proposed daily hours of operation limited to daylight hours, and plans for mitigating potential adverse impacts to adjoining properties, a plan for the entrance, as well as adequate parking facilities, crowd control, and traffic control, a plan for market facilities and structures. Permanent structures may also require a building and zoning permit, and a requirement that the market be maintained in clean and sanitary condition at all times. And these application plans would then become conditions of the permit, along with any other conditions that the board may set to apply for the 5-year period. A revised permit would be required if there were any material changes in the information or plans submitted, and failure to comply could result in a revocation with 10 days notice to the permittee. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
If a person currently has a farmer's market permit right now, the next time they could get a 5-year, they wouldn't have to do another 1 year and then a 5-year, right?
That's correct. It's set up to, if they've had a prior permit, that would be considered good.
Okay. All right. Is there any other questions for Ms. Huffman? Okay. All right. At this time, we will open up the public hearing. So anyone signed up wishing to address the board?
Yes, first up is Mr. Stephen Hart.
Evening, Steve Hart, Carr Creek. Mr. Chairman, thank you for moving this up. I would like to encourage you to support this. Our farmers market has been going now for 4 years, which makes us 3 years longer than most small businesses. And I think we've been pretty successful and been a benefit to the county. The plan, as I heard briefed, sounds really good to me. One thing I would like you to think about, Ms. Huffman mentioned ending at dusk. There've been a couple of times like at Christmas and where we've done special markets in the fall for like our Christmas market, where it's nice to kind of go half an hour past dusk like you'd see at a traditional German Christmas market. So maybe like dusk plus an hour would be appreciated for our special events. But otherwise, I think this is really good, and it'd be really helpful for our market, and I'm sure it would for the other markets as well. Thank you very much for considering this.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Is there anyone else signed up wishing to address the board? Anyone present didn't have an opportunity to sign up? Okay. Anyone online wishing to address the board?
Yes, sir.
All right, at this point, we will close the public hearing. Any board discussion on the matter?
No, I want to thank Ms. Huffman and Mr. Lewis for working on this. It sounds like a really good improvement. To Mr. Hart's point, in terms of lighting, I would just want to clarify that would require lighting, correct? Is there provisions here for lighting to go past dusk? To go?
There are not currently provisions for lighting. I believe what has always been approved has been daylight hours without need to address lighting plans.
Right.
It may take working with Mr. Sladen a little bit to figure out what, if you're going past daylight hours, then what do we need to see?
Right. So I guess that answers my question there, but as written, I want to thank you again for working on that. Yes.
Any other questions? If we approve what's been done, or take a vote on what's been done, the questions about going past dusk for a limited amount of time or lighting or whatnot, that can be worked on and brought back as a revision at some point.
It could be, you would go through the whole process again. You'd
Yeah.
advertise again and hold another public hearing.
Yeah, but it could be updated.
It could be, yes, sir.
Okay.
I would think would generally, I think would, my sense of what Mr. Hart was saying there is that we don't have to put up lights and do all that. If the transactions were still taking place, can it, we're not going to haul everybody off right at dusk. Was my sense of what he was saying. But I certainly don't want to derail this progress. So I think I would like to just move ahead with this. And I suppose when we get to the point where motions would be entertained, I think.
I don't think that's what he was saying. I think there's special occasions where they need a little darkness, and if it was Christmas, you'd probably have Christmas lights up, which you really couldn't see during the daytime. But he's right here, so we can ask him what he was implying. And
Lines is correct. We did have.
Can you come forward? Thank you.
We did have at our Christmas market last year, Christmas lights. That's how we lit the place up. And so, I mean, and we went, I think, until half an hour past dusk. And we're actually got this year, we said, we're going to move it a little bit earlier. I did not realize my suggestion was going to be that complicated. I will take it off the table, right? Because I don't want to make this hard and difficult, and it really shouldn't be. And, that thing for us would be 1 or 2 events a year, and we'll finish them by dark. So let's remove that. And let's get this done.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hart.
with that, I move to approve.
Okay, is there a second?
No, second.
All right. Mr. Lyons?
Yes.
Ms. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Aye.
Mr. Day?
Yes.
And Chair votes yes as well. And again, I would like to thank all parties involved for that as well. Hopefully it will be good for our local farmers markets. All right, now we have Thunder Bridge Campground located at 1445 Arnold's Valley Road, Natural Station. Application for a special exception permit for cultural music center in the agricultural transitional zoning district. Mr. Slade.
Yes, thank you. So this is 3 public hearings pertaining to the same property. There will be some redundancies in my verbal report. The first one we have is pertaining to the Cultural Music Center. Thunder Bridge Campground LLC for 1445 Arnold Valley Road, Natural Bridge, Virginia, Natural Bridge Station, Virginia, has made an application for a special exception permit to operate a cultural music center in the agricultural transitional zone. That's the AT zoning district. Mr. and Mrs. Panabaker are here representing the project as members of the LLC. The property is further identified as tax map number 113-A-7 and consists of 94.65 acres per tax records per section 603B.03-13A of the County of Rockbridge Land Development Regulations. Cultural music centers are used by special exception in the AT zoning district. The property is located on the east side and west side of Arnold Valley Road at the intersection of Arnold Valley Road and Petite's Gap Road, served by private well and private drain field. Per section 302.56A of the regulations, cultural music center is defined as a facility or group of facilities where a leasing fee or admission fee is charged and groups of individuals gather for the purpose of listening or participating to live music conducted within a enclosed structure. On February 8th, 2023, the Planning Commission held its public hearing and has recommended approval of the special exception application with the following conditions. Number 1, substantial compliance with the development plan titled Thunder Bridge Campground dated February 1st, 2023. That is in your package. Essentially, it's an aerial photo showing the existing facility. So this application would be limited to the existing footprint of the existing facility. Number 2, Cultural Music Center is limited to 34 music studios. Number 3, Cultural Music Center is limited to 104 events, music concerts per calendar year. Number 4, event manager shall be on site during all events. Number 5, alcohol beverages will not be self-served. Number 6, adequate off-street parking and traffic controls will be provided. No parking along Arnold Valley Road, further identified as 759. All trash, number 7, all trash will be taken directly to the landfill and not the county collection centers or green boxes. Number 8, lighting shall be in compliance with 1303.00 of the regulations. And number 9, final condition, approval contingent upon Virginia Department of Transportation, Health Department, and Building Department approvals. With that, I'd like to turn the floor over to Mr. and Mr. Panabaker to come up and give you a little bit more details on the project.
Good evening. I'm James Panabaker. Good to see you again after a year away. As owners of Thunder Bridge, formerly the Natural Bridge Juvenile Correction Center, we're gradually figuring out how to use the more than 32 buildings on our campus. Unlike most of the people who come to you for zoning approvals, we don't have a blank slate to start from. I suppose we could if we remove buildings and started from scratch, but we want to preserve and renew this property's history as the best remaining civilian conservation corps camp and its subsequent use as a trend-setting training camp for delinquent youth. After we toured the property for the first time, I asked one of the friends who accompanied us what he thought we could do with it. He laughed and said it would make a great boys' home. Well, that wasn't in the cards for fairly obvious reasons. Since then, we've given many tours and received many suggestions. For example, at our first appearance before the Planning Commission, one of its members encouraged us to make the ball fields available to county youth. Our requests today represent our intent to implement some of these suggestions. We understand we may be the first to ask for 5 special exceptions for a single property. You've already approved 2 of them, the campground and the Cultural Arts Center. Today, we encourage you to recommend approval. Encourage you to approve 3 more, the Cultural Music Center, Parks and Playground, and special events. The first special exception, Cultural Music Center, follows up our Cultural Arts Center special exception. I'm sorry we didn't apply for both of them at the same time as they complement each other. Music is, of course, one of the arts, and music activities fit in well with our Cultural Arts Center endeavors. We understand that this approval relates to indoor music activities and that we will need to separately apply each time we propose to offer outside performances. We have a full-size gymnasium that we have begun to renovate. As I mentioned when we came to request our Cultural Arts Center special exception, my dream is to restore the stage and provide a venue for concerts, theater, dance, art shows, and more. The Cultural Arts Center special exception allows us to offer theater, dance, art shows, and other arts-related activities. A Cultural Music Center, this special exception we're talking about now, would specifically allow music concerts. The Cultural Arts Center special exception that we already have permits us to provide art studios in our barracks and other buildings. The Cultural Music Center special exception would allow us to use these same buildings for music studios. Back in the woods, our pavilion serves as the base for many campground activities, and it includes bathrooms and showers and a large interior gathering space. Our Cultural Arts Center special exception allows us to use this for art activities. The Cultural Music Center special exception would specifically allow music activities. Please approve this special exception. Do you have any? I'm glad to answer questions.
Any questions for Mr. Panabaker?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you for the work you're doing there. All right, at this time, we will open up public hearings. Anyone signed up wishing to address the board?
No, sir.
Is anyone online wishing to address the board?
No, sir.
All right, then at this point, anyone present didn't have opportunity to sign up? Okay, we will close the public hearing. Any board discussion? Since it's in my district, I'll just say, I mean, the work that they're doing there at the facility is phenomenal. It's really adding to the community. And I very much support each of these. As well as not in line with this, but the Panabakers were also very helpful with us at an intersection there in Arnold's Valley, helping to provide better line of sight and stuff like that. So they were doing numerous things for our community in that particular area. With that, is there any other discussion or a motion for approval?
Move to approve.
And a second?
Second.
All right. Mr. Lyons?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Aye.
Mr. Day?
Yes.
Ms. Ayers?
Yes.
And Chair votes yes as well. Next up, Mr. Slayton, I believe we have the Thunder Ridge Campground, 1445 Orange Valley Road, Nashville Station, Virginia. Special exception permit for park venue for sports activities.
Yes, sir. Thunderbridge Campground LLC, 1445 Arnold Valley Road, has made an application for a special exception permit to operate a park, essentially a venue for sports activities in the agricultural transitional zoning district. Property is further identified as tax map number 113-A-7 per section 603B.03-18 of the regulations. Parks and playgrounds are used by special exception. Same location as the previous one per section 1303.152 of the regulations. Parks and playgrounds are defined as land publicly or privately owned, devoted to recreational pursuits, usually in an open area reserved for outdoor activities such as play, hiking, exercise, or competitive sport, not requiring structures for habitation. On February 8th, 2023, the Planning Commission held its public hearing and has recommended the approval of special exception application with the following conditions. Number one, substantial compliance with the development plan prepared by the applicant, titled Thunderbridge Campground, dated February 1st, 2021, showing the existing footprints of buildings. Number two, events will be limited to a maximum of 320 attendees with no more than 165 vehicles on site. For events. Event manager shall be on site during all activities. Number three, alcohol beverages are prohibited. Number four, all site activities will be concluded by 10 p.m. on Sunday through Thursday and 11 p.m. on Friday and Saturdays. Adequate off-street parking facilities and traffic controls will be provided. No parking along Arnold Valley Road. Again, Route 759 or Petite's Gap Road 781. A stop sign shall be installed on the property at the exits from Artist Loop, private road, and Thunderbridge Lane, private road. All trash shall be taken directly to the landfill and not county collection centers or green boxes. Number eight, lighting shall be in compliance with 1303 of the regulations, of the Rockbridge County Land Development Regulations. Number nine, special events special events, art and or craft shows or music concerts can be held while park is in use, not to exceed 320 attendees and 165 vehicles on site. A loud system will be installed for emergency purposes. And number 11, final condition, approval contingent upon County Building Department, Virginia Department of Transportation, Health Department, and or Public Service Authority approvals. With that, I'd like to turn the floor back over to Mr. Panabaker to review the details of the park application.
Well, as I already indicated, several folks have inquired about using our pasture, ball fields, obstacle course, and gymnasium. For example, a girls softball league asked about the ball fields for outdoor practice and games and the gym for indoor practice. The girls basketball league also expressed interest in the gym. Other folks have suggested making the gym available for basketball, pickleball, tennis, and bingo. We have an 8-acre pasture with 2 ball fields and an obstacle course. We also have what some folks call a world-class obstacle course. For indoor sports such as basketball and pickleball, we have a full-size, about 7,000 square foot gymnasium. Please approve our application for this special exception.
Thank you, Mr. Panabaker. Is there any questions for Mr. Panabaker or Mr. Slayton on this?
You have lights in the field already?
We do not have lights.
Are there plans to put lights?
No, we do not have plans.
Curious why it was
we had that conversation at the planning commission, and if they ever choose to put lights.
You want it to come back.
Exactly.
Okay, got it.
Any other questions? All right,
Thank you.
thank you. At this time, we'll open the public hearing. Is everyone signed up?
No, sir.
All right. Anyone in attendance? Okay. Anyone online?
No, sir.
All right, we will close the public hearing. Any board discussion? Is there a motion to approve?
I just have one comment. I'm all for the projects, but and Mr. Sladen may have more info based on the planning commission. I didn't go back and revisit these as I sometimes do, but the number of events that we're allowing are different throughout these different uses. I didn't, if I missed it, I'm not sure that I saw a number for the music center.
Yes, the music center was limited to, I'm sorry, no, it's 104 music concerts essentially is what was listed here. What was approved just now.
And the park is requesting, that's the one that doesn't have.
Yeah,
any-
and we did have, excuse me, we did have that conversation at the planning commission level, and rather than the original draft conditions for the sports venue that could have been utilized had a maximum number of events, but that was replaced with events will be limited to a maximum number of people. Both the music, well, this one, they thought it was fairly self-limiting, minus practices, not having lights, that type of thing, of how many events would be taking place there versus practice, that type of thing.
I'm not sure I would see that, and I'm not trying to limit it. My goal is to not have to limit. I want to have the people who are investing in properties all around the county be able to use them to their maximum ability. So we'll get to the last one where the special event venues, which we've approved several, and there's a 52 limit on that one. I'm pretty sure I'm right, Mr. Slayton, but if I'm not, point is we are, continually restricting these things. And I just wanted to get it out there that I think they should be able to be used as often as they can. Obviously, there's some disturbance issues there with neighbors and so forth, but for sites that are placed or located where there's not going to, the potential of that is very limited. I'd like to see more usage be available. All that being said, move we approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Mr. Lewis?
Aye.
Mr. Lyons?
Yes.
Ms. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Day?
Yes.
And Chair votes yes as well. And lastly, we have the Thunder Bridge Campgrounds special exception permit for special event venue.
That's correct. Yes, sir. The Thunder Bridge Campground LLC, 1445 Arnold Valley Road, has made an application for a special exception permit to operate a special event venue in the A2 zoning district. And the tax map number is 113-A-7 and consists of 94.65 acres per tax records. Per section 603B 03-20 of the regulations, a special event is a use by special exception in the AT zoning district. I'll skip the definitions on this particular one. It's defined, special events are defined per section 302.191B of the regulations. On February 8th, 2023, the Rockbridge County Planning Commission held its public hearing and has recommended approval of the special exception application with the following conditions. Number one, the permit is limited to no more than 52 special events per year. Number two, substantial compliance with the development plan prepared by the applicant titled Thunder Bridge Map, dated February 1st, 2023. Events will be limited to a maximum of 320 attendees with no more than 165 vehicles on site per event. Event manager shall be on site during all special events. Number four, all site activities will be concluded by 10 p.m. on Sunday through Thursday and 11 p.m. on Fridays and Saturdays. Adequate off-street parking facilities and traffic controls will be provided. No parking along Arnold Valley Road or Petite's Gap. A stop sign shall be installed on the property that exits Artist Loop and Thunder Bridge Lane. Number 6, alcoholic beverages will not be self-served. Number 7, all trash will be taken directly to landfill and not the county collection centers or green boxes. Number 8, any amplified music must be within an enclosed structure. Number 9, if at art and or craft shows or music concerts are being held during special events, the total number of attendees shall not exceed 320 with no more than 165 vehicles on site. Number 10, lighting shall be in compliance with 1303.00 of the County of Rockbridge Land Development Regulations. Number 11, no aerial fireworks or gun salutes shall be permitted. No open air fire shall be permitted by attendees. Number 12, approval contingent on County Building Department, Virginia Department of Transportation, VDOT Health Department, and or Public Service Authority approvals. With that, again, I'd like to turn the floor over to Mr. Baker to represent the special event venue project.
I'm back. We frequently receive requests from persons seeking an affordable venue for weddings, reunions, and receptions. Patrons could use one or more of our facilities as part of their special event. The buildings in our main cluster include cottages, a commercial kitchen and dining hall, 4 barracks. The forested area beyond the pasture includes a couple log cabins and the pavilion I mentioned earlier. We also have the gym, which could accommodate an indoor wedding, reunion, or reception. We also have an extensive commercial kitchen fully equipped with ovens, griddle tops, mixers, a steamer, refrigerators, a walk-in freezer, and other equipment. And as I mentioned, there's a dining hall connected to the kitchen used to serve the boys and the staff at the correctional center. Please approve our special events, special exception. Thank you.
Is there any questions from Mr. Pannebeck?
No.
Thank you.
You know, there was a question about the number of events and stuff like that. I mean, do you feel what the planning commission approved is adequate for your needs?
For now, yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Is there any, let's see here. At this point, we will open up public hearings. Anyone signed up wishing to address the board? Anyone present that did not have an opportunity? All right. Anyone online? Nope. No, sir. All right. At this point, we'll close the public hearing. Is there any other board discussion? All right. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
And a second? All right. Ms. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Day? Mr. Lewis? Aye. Mr. Lyons?
Yes.
And Chair votes yes as well. Thank you, Mr. and Ms. Pannebeck, for all you're doing for our community down there.
Thank you.
I noticed this came in on 3 different applications. There's no way that could come in on one application, you know. The gentleman paid 3 different fees, applications, and maybe.
That is correct. And they're treated as 3 separate applications for multiple reasons. One, they have unique conditions that are associated with each application. And number 2, essentially for the Pannebaker's benefit, if one of them, if one discussion wasn't going as fast or as quickly as other discussions, one could have been approved by the planning commission, or 2 could have been approved by the planning commission, proceed forward with you to the board of supervisors, I should say, and then the other one, it still would be lingering.
So it was really their decision.
Well, no, it was a staff decision. I mean, it essentially, it has to be 3. There's 3 different uses and there's 3 different applications because it's 3 different sections that they're applying for. And so one couldn't make one special exception application for multiple different uses. I understand the comment for sure, but that's the reasoning behind the decision.
I understand the 3 different applications and 3 different public hearings, certainly. My question was going to be, and this is not the proper time to ask, let me know. We can discuss it some other time. Was there a need necessarily for 3 different fees?
To help cover the cost that the staff accrues, and that would be for certified mailing. And in fact, we did save some money. That's a good point, because we did obviously sent 3 notices of public hearing, but we did not mail those in 3 separate applications. We did accrue costs 3 separate times for the newspaper ads and other those type of items, but staffing for sure. Yeah. but that is a good point as far as the public do, the notice to adjoiners was covered in one mailing cost. Not three separate mailing costs.
I think he had something. Yeah, I was just gonna say that the fees that are charged now don't cover these costs. And it's anticipated that there will be a proposal at some point to increase the cost to cover what these applications cost the county. Thank you.
And this is unusual that we have, it's unusual that we have three special exception property or special exceptions running at the same time on the same property. It's also, I'm not sure, I think I remember maybe two, but one other time that we had two dueling special exceptions. So it is unusual, but I'll certainly keep y'all's comments in my mind moving forward.
Thank you, Mr.
Yes, thank y'all.
All right, next up, we have the admissions tax change of due date. Ms. Huffman?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, this is a fairly simple request to amend the provisions of the admissions tax due date. Previously, it has been 10 within 10 days of the event or within 10 days at the end of the month when the events were held. And it resulted in the Commissioner of Revenue's office having different dates for processing these tax payments. So the request has been to make things more efficient for everyone, to modify that due date to be due on the last day of the month for all admissions taxes, to simplify auditing and enforcement for his office. That you have a proposed ordinance to make that change on board docs, and I'll be glad to answer any questions. It does require public hearing.
Is there any questions for Ms. Huffman?
Nope.
All right. At this point, we'll open a public hearing. Is anyone signed up wishing to address the board? Anyone present? Okay. Anyone online?
No, sir.
All right. At this point, we'll close the public hearing. Any board discussion, motions?
Move to approve.
And a second?
Second.
All righty. Mr. Lyons?
Yes.
Mr. Day?
Yes.
Ms. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Aye.
And Chair votes yes as well. Next up, we have the transient occupancy tax change of due date. Ms. Huffman?
This is a similar request, but it is coming from a statewide initiative from the Commissioners of Revenue Association to establish consistent tax returns for transient occupancy taxes. They're going to make available some online forms for people to complete and file their taxes when due. So the request from the Commissioner of Revenue, in order to take advantage of this online form for filing, is to change the due date to the 20th day of the following month. And the proposed ordinance includes that change. And this is public hearing, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. Is there any questions for Ms. Huffman?
Nope.
All righty. At this point, we will open a public hearing. Is anyone signed up wishing to address the board? Anyone present? Anyone online?
No, sir.
All right, at this point, we will close public hearing. Any other board discussion or motions?
Mr. Weitzel's in favor of this.
Yes, sir, he requested.
Move to approve.
And a second?
Second.
All right, Mr. Lyons?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Aye.
Mr. Day?
Yes.
Ms. Ayers?
Yes.
And Chair votes yes as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're back to number 8, which is the opioid settlement approval.
I thought I was done.
Not quite.
Not yet. I believe this is Ms. Huffman as well.
We were recently advised by outside counsel that at the national level, there has been a new settlement agreed by a number of the defendants in the opioid litigation. Those defendants are Teva, Allergan, Walmart, Walgreens, CVS, and a number of their related entities, affiliates, and the basis of the settlement is for their role in the distribution, manufacture, and sale of opioid products that have fueled the epidemic. The terms are for global settlements that combined will provide over $18.7 billion to state and local governments nationwide. The amount expected to be received by Virginia is $425 million in the aggregate. Each one of these is a separate settlement. They have different terms. Some are paid over 10 years, some over 7 years. They vary in terms of their amounts, how long they're paid, what amounts are paid annually, what's required in terms of starting the distribution. But for the sake of efficiency, the proposed resolution included on board docs is to authorize the outside counsel and or myself to execute whatever documents need to be done to effectuate the settlement. Outside counsel recommends this settlement, and I concur.
Is there any questions from myself?
Is effectuate a word? That's a good one.
I think so.
All right, I used it if it wasn't. I gotta look at, I remember my shoe.
What, should I look it up?
No, no. I was just making sure. Legal term. Yeah.
Any other questions, comments? So do you need a motion and a vote on that?
I need, yes, sir, and I'm gonna need it signed tonight.
Okay, so the motion is to authorize you.
Well, to adopt the proposed resolution that has everything in there that's needed.
Okay, all right. So move. And a second. All right. Mr. Lyons?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Aye.
Ms. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Day?
Yes.
And Chair votes yes as well. All right, any board comments? Anybody have anything for the good of the cause? Okay, just a friendly reminder, the board will hold its budget meeting on Monday, March 6th at 5:30 here in this room. And our next regular board meeting will be March 13th. Mr. Suter, do you have anything else? No, sir. All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And second?
Yes.
All right, Mr. Lewis?
Aye.
Ms. Ayers? Mr. Lyons?
Yes.
Mr.